So today we're going to focus on getting all of that trim prepped and painted, installed, and then we'll move on to the moldings and get all that stuff on the car, and that way it's going to look like a complete car again. So here is project tax return, and if you remember, the car has pretty fresh paint, but none of the trim has been installed yet. So that's all the trim that goes around the windshield, the rear window, and then the trim that goes around the door frames here. All of this door frame has already been done. These pieces were most likely changed and put with new aftermarket pieces. So both this lower door piece as well as the upper door frame trim, these guys are more of a plastic as opposed to the metal trim that are around the windshield and the rear window. So those ones, if they've been weathered or they're old, they'll be kind of like cracked. It's hard to explain. You've probably seen and know what I'm talking about. So those ones you kind of got to sand down into and prep a little bit more, as I was talking about earlier. Now, the one thing that I can't stress enough is using the right products when you're doing these types of projects. Now, these quarter windows here on this car are in pretty nice shape, but someone has repaired them. And I think what they've done is they've just tried to use a bunch of high build primer and, you know, filled up all the pitting and sanded it down. You can see this line is missing just a little bit here. It's kind of faded in, and you can see that there's actually a crack here. Now, this crack is obviously a result of using a product that filled too much, it's too hard, and couldn't deal with the flex and resulted in a crack. So it's a little unfortunate. You can see a couple little sanding marks and everything else down here. Again, these quarter windows look really good, but they could have been better. And that's why I like using the products that I do when I'm restoring these. So by using that flexible polyester filler, then the flexible primer, and then the flexible trim paint on top, really make sure that you're going to have nice quarter window moldings for a really, really long time. So again, make sure you use the proper products and don't just be grabbing whatever rattle can of paint that you have and trying to spray stuff. So the problem is that it just makes things that much more challenging if I wanted to go ahead and try and restore this trim, because I would actually have to sand right down through all of this product from before and make sure that it's pretty much removed. And you know what? I rather deal with a really, really bad set of untouched window moldings rather than trying to recondition these. So, you know, again, these ones are nice. They're not perfect. I'm not going to touch them. They're staying with the car. Now, my trim that I'm painting, on the other hand, that's going to look perfect. And this car is going to look really good when it's all done. The other thing that we'll be focusing on is getting all of the moldings reinstalled. So the one there on the rear quarter panel, everything on the door sides and on the fenders. So that way all of the car looks like it's back together. Most importantly, I'm excited to see what the car is going to look like with the motor sitting back in it. So it's sitting level, sitting right. So there you have it, guys. That's today's task. Let's get started and start prepping up that trim. A couple months ago, I did a video on quarter window molding restoration, and today I figured, since I was elbow deep into doing some of this trim here that you see on this cardboard, that I'd go ahead and show you guys exactly my process in terms of restoring trim and making it look like new again. So these are all the pieces off of Project Tax Return. Yeah.
So what you call it? Project Tax Return?
Yeah, why not?
I can't wait for mine to come back in. I don't even know what I'm gonna buy.
Since the camera's facing that way, you can see there's been a little bit of progress made on the 58 Corvette. I have been trying to get a little bit of footage of that together. It's really challenging just because this is new to me and I didn't take it apart. Every single nut and bolt that I look at is new. So that's about 3 days now, just getting trim, bumpers, windshield, all of those things installed. So stay tuned for some 58 Corvette content. All right, so I'm working away here, getting all this trim finalized and ready for paint. So this is everything that's going on project tax return. If you remember, all the trim was off the car. The rest of the car has been painted, but they hadn't touched this yet. So a lot of this stuff I've gone over already, but I wanted to show you guys a few key things when you're going through and restoring the trim for your Fox. Now, the first thing is when you're popping this off, now you can paint it on the car, if you mask and cover everything up with plastic or paper, but it's always easier and it's a more thorough job when you take it off. So it's really important that you're careful when you're popping this off. You want to use a special panel popper or similar, and make sure that you get right underneath the clips, and make sure that you cover your glass, because when you're prying down, you don't want to be putting the pressure on your glass. And you need to be careful because these are actually, they're really fragile. And if you put too much pressure on, they're going to bend, or worse, they're going to kink. So there was actually one little kink here. I've got some spot putty on it, and I've already spot puttied a couple other just little dents. Those could have been stones that flew up, or maybe something landed on them during transport, since they have been off the car. So all these have been sanded down, and it's really important that you go through the steps depending how bad your trim is. And I'm going to show you guys a couple examples here, but the main thing is you want to make sure that it's super smooth. And I can't stress enough that your end result is a result of the preparation that you've done in order to get your end product. So if you think that you're done your prep, chances are you're probably not. So my recommendation is that however much time you put into prepping everything, when you think you're done, put in another 20%. Just because that little extra bit is going to make sure that you've covered everything. So one key thing that you guys want to be conscious about is when you get little nicks like this, if you don't feather them out and make them nice and smooth, that's going to stick out and it's not going to look very good. Number one. Number two, what's going to happen is chances are either moisture or air or debris, or this is just going to continue lifting underneath your fresh paint, and it's going to result in your trim not looking very good in the end. 400 grit sandpaper, and you just kind of go over those little nicks. Just like this. Feathered out and smooth, and that's going to be all right. So after your 400 grit on here, your last sanding is a purple Scotch pad, which is pretty much the equivalent to about a 600 grit. And that's more than enough to scuff down the rest of the paint and the material. And you want to make sure, again, any little nicks, chips, or anything, you want this surface to look as smooth and as good as your painted product, just without it being painted, because the paint's just going to elevate any of the imperfections that are in your trim. So that goes for the metal pieces. Now, the pieces that go along your door frame, these guys can be a little trickier. They almost have a rubberized coating, I find, from factory, and if they start pitting or cracking, they can be a real nuisance to deal with. So this one has been all smoothed down and prepped. It's looking really nice, but this guy hasn't. So I don't know if the camera can pick this up. I really hope that it can, but you can see all kinds of marks and imperfections underneath the paint. So somebody's already painted these once upon a time, and this is what I was talking about, that you don't want to restore your trim just for it to look bad again. So it might look a little bit better and it might look good from 10 feet away, but you want to make sure that everything is nice and smooth and you can just see the difference. So I'm going to go ahead and get this guy all prepped up so it looks like this, and then we'll get these guys painted. A couple of things to remember: 400 grit sandpaper when you got to feather out or get into some little craters in the paint or chips in the paint or anything like that. Your final sand is a purple Scotch pad. So now for these guys, these plastic trim pieces that go around your window frames and the pieces that are down on the top side of your doors, those ones, if that texture is starting to crack and you can kind of see it almost looks like spider webs all through everything, that one you might need a coarser grit sandpaper. So in that case, you can use like a 240 grit. Make sure it's all smooth and then go over it with the 400. Make sure you sand out all of the 240 grit scratches before you proceed any further. Because if you just skip to the Scotch pad, you're going to see those sand scratches through your paint. So you need to make sure that you follow the sanding steps to make sure that you have a really nice end product. So typically I use this Marhide black satin paint. This is the same paint that I used on the quarter window moldings that I restored. And I can't stress enough the importance of using proper paint. Trim paint is a flexible paint and it's meant to go onto plastics and rubbers and trim-like surfaces. If you use rust paints or you use just acrylics or paints that aren't meant to be exposed to UV, you're going to run into issues in the future. So please, please, please make sure that you use a proper trim paint. Now, you can also use the SEM trim paint, which works really well. So with both the SEM and the Marhide trim paints, they're going to recommend that you prime all of your parts first. So that means you're going to prime everything that you've prepped, then you're going to go over it all again with the purple Scotch pad, and then you can spray your top coat. You'll do probably 3 to 4 light coats, and everything will look really good. So for this time, I'm actually going to try a new product, and this is actually a 2-in-1 flexible bumper trim paint, and it's TranStar. I tried this on a plastic grill insert for the shop truck. It actually came out really, really good. So the advantage of this guy is that you don't need to prime. And same amount of coats, same preparation and everything else. So I'm probably going to go ahead and try this guy out on all of these trim pieces, and we'll see what happens. It's made for trim, and it says right on here, it's tough, flexible polymer coating designed to restore bumpers in flexible or rigid trim to their OEM condition. So it offers 3 levels. You can get matte, satin, or gloss to match the appearance of your vehicle. So in this case, we're using satin. And what does it say? It has excellent adhesion to urethane, rubber, metal, and treated olefin plastics. So it's fast drying, provides excellent adhesion, and requires no priming. So, like I said, I tried this stuff out earlier. It seemed to work really well. So we're going to use it on our Fox trim here, and hopefully it's going to look really, really good. So here's the grill that I finished up for the shop truck, and this has been done in that trim paint, and this was just scuffed down with purple Scotch pad, cleaned up, degreased, all that stuff, and it came out really, really nice. So based on this result, I'm going to go ahead and be trying this on all the trim for project tax return. Alright guys, so everything has been sanded down, prepped, scuffed, wiped down with brake clean, so everything is free of grease. Wipe down all the surface to make sure there's no dust or dirt or anything like that. And again, going to be going with the 2-in-1 trim paint this time. So one thing you want to keep in mind is that you don't have to prime with this, but if you're not 100% confident in your prep work, you'd almost rather prime first, because the primer is going to bring any of your imperfections to surface. You only get one shot with this, otherwise you're going to be waiting until it dries and then scuffing it down and potentially doing your work over again. So you don't want to be wasting a bunch of your trim paint unless you're confident that everything is going to be good. So I've gone over this numerous times. I did my spot putty. I used 240 grit on some of the tougher areas, then the 400, then the purple Scotch pad. So I'm going to shake this up, do our 3-4 lightish coats, and go home for the night. So it's actually 2 days since I've painted the trim, and everything came out really good. Sitting over here, all laid out and ready to go. So this again was the 2-in-1 that I used, and trying to get everything all organized here. This actually gives you a really good opportunity to make sure that all your glass and your windows are clean. So I actually spray glass cleaner and go over everything with a razor blade, and that'll make sure that your glass is as clean as can be. Some of you might say, how can you use a razor blade on your glass? Well, obviously you don't want to go in a way where you're nicking and scratching the glass. You want to go with the glass. So get the windshield all cleaned up and razor bladed down, and then we'll go over getting all this trim reinstalled and the car looking like it's back together in one piece again. What you guys want to do is just spray on some glass cleaner. It'll essentially lubricate the glass for you. Take your razor blade. I don't know if you guys can hear that. It almost sounds like sand against the glass. So that indicates probably some overspray, most likely from the body shop when the car got painted. Overspray can get everywhere, but the razor blade's going to make sure that everything is nice and clean. Hopefully you guys can hear that. So the idea is you shouldn't hear anything when the glass is clean. So once you've got everything scraped, you shouldn't hear any more of that almost like sandpaper on the glass sound. Got some trim clips here that need to go on the car because not all of them are installed. So they're pretty simple. They just go on one way and go on to these little nipples that you see here. So you can push that on, and then I'll show you guys a trick to push it on all the way without wrecking the end of your fingers. All right, so you can see I got this open-ended, almost like a little panel popper, rubber mallet, and all you got to do is put that on the bottom edge of the clip, give it a little tap, and the clips will go into place. So one trick is to take the bottom trim molding that goes on the bottom side of the windshield here, and the cowling is loose, it's not screwed down, so we'll be able to slide that underneath. So slide this guy like this, and we'll leave this guy loose because we want to be able to slide it underneath the top here before we push everything down. All right, so now that we got the front and rear window trim on, now is the time to do these guys that run above the top of the door frames. So these ones have a goo inside from factory, and it's pretty sticky. And I'm going to be keeping up with the sticky theme with this 3M weather strip adhesive. So this stuff works really well whether you're trying to glue down some weather stripping or maybe even repair a tear in your weather strip. You essentially just put a bit on, let it get tacky. Once it gets tacky, push it up in place. Now just be sure that you know what you're doing, because it is messy stuff. If you put too much on and you start smearing it or getting it on your paint, then you're gonna have to probably get some thinner or something to take it off. There is one screw mounting point on these guys up inside the door frame area here with the door open, and that's how you get these guys off. You just take out that one screw and then you slowly pry this piece out, getting all the goo out. I'm gonna go ahead and apply this weather strip adhesive in here. Note there are a few clips on this trim. They're sort of like that on the windshield and rear glass to hold the trim on. They're kind of just pressure fit and in there. They're hard to see because of all the black goo. I'm not going to take out the black goo or try and remove it, because having that little bit extra in there really isn't going to hurt anything. It'll keep things sealed up. So, you know, just get a generous amount in the channel, let it sit for about 5 minutes so it can get tacky. Then we can go ahead and push this stuff up into place. Make sure that you got this seam done. I'll just go ahead, push it up in place like that. Grab our screw. There we go. Looks like new. Just got to get my handprints off it. So there you have it. Trim installed, all on the driver's side here. I'm going to go ahead, knock out the passenger side, get that done with. And from there, I'll throw in a couple molding pieces for see how far we can get tonight. Managed to get that window trim on. Car's looking like it's a little bit more together now. Got to make a couple notes just so that I don't forget some things. I need the little clips that go on the bottom side of this trim piece here, underneath in the trunk area, to make sure that this guy is held down. And I need one of the speed nuts attached on that front molding. Then I need to get enough speed nuts to get the passenger side attached. Now, I haven't gone into any of the actual sticking of the moldings on with the adhesives. So right now, this car is sitting the way that a lot of people leave their Foxes. They'll get all their body and paint work done, and they won't go ahead and reinstall those moldings on the door, the front of the quarter panel, and the rear of the front fender. And this just drives me nuts. I get it. I get how nice and clean that this looks. The problem is you can't have this and then have a molding in the front. And unfortunately, Ford designed the bumpers in a way that there's no way around it. Like, even if you left this guy off and you shaved the holes behind this guy and this was all smooth, and I think I've seen this done, this bumper's gonna stick out. So somebody needs to design a bumper that this molding is actually integrated and flush back into the bumper. And same thing with the front. If somebody could do that, then you could have this molding free look that, don't get me wrong, it looks super clean. Like, this is a really nice clean look, but at the same time, you got to remember, shit happens, and that molding protects your metal. So by leaving this metal exposed like this, it means that you have an opportunity to get more door dings and your door accidentally opening and hitting something, or somebody hitting you. You'd be surprised how often the moldings will actually protect your car at the end of the day. So not to worry, these moldings are going back on 100%. Although I understand why some people leave these off and why they want to go after this look. To me, it just drives my OCD nuts when, as soon as you get past this section of the car, all of a sudden you see the original moldings again. So there's a little bit of a rant slash my opinion. And other than that, the car is looking really good. I'm really happy with the way that the trim turned out. And like I said, the 2-in-1 Trim paint seems to look really good. Goes really nice with the OEM looking, well, although these are aftermarket, but still everything matches, everything looks good. So that's it for Project Tax Return for today. And thank you guys for tuning along. I got a boatload of inquiries about this car, and I'm thinking it might be sold here shortly, but I'll be sure to update you guys next week on what's happening and which way Project Tax Return is going to go in terms of a drivetrain. And is it going to be more of a stock build? Will it be a mild build? Will it be some sort of crazy swap? I'll be sure to let you guys know. But until then, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, subscribing, especially if you followed along this long.